Hello, everyone. Welcome to Frank Analysis. I am your host, Franco, and I'm joined today by Kit Klarenberg, who is an investigative journalist and contributor to the Gray Zone. He focuses on intelligence services and how they shape politics and perceptions. And he wrote an article recently on leaked emails reviewed by the Gray Zone. And these emails reveal a plot by a cabal of pro-leave elites to sabotage the Brexit deal by Theresa May, infiltrate the British government, spy on campaign groups, and replace May with Boris Johnson. Now, Theresa May is the former Prime Minister of the United Kingdom and leader of the Conservative Party from 2016 to 2019. And Priti Patel, who's the UK Home Secretary, set to decide on Julian Assange's extradition to the United States, also has a connection with this cabal. So we're going to discuss all of that here today with Kit. It is great to have you on. Thank you very much for taking time out of your day to join us and to inform the public. Thank you, Kit.
Oh no, it's my pleasure. It's my pleasure.
Now, for the people who don't know about Brexit, what was that all about, and what were the opposing viewpoints of the pro-leave and pro-remain factions of the UK?
Well, yeah, I think it's. It was a very big question. There's an awful lot to unpack. But I think that
Yeah.
essentially, my take on Brexit would be that this was in June 2016. 17.4 million people voted to leave the EU, which was the largest democratic mandate ever achieved in British history. I mean, it's typically governments get elected on about 10 million. The ruling party gets about 10 million in general elections. So this is almost double that. And I think that there are an enormous number of people who felt disenfranchised, felt disillusioned, were not happy about the way that the country was going, and were willing to kind of look to anything that they thought might make their lives better, and indeed that would serve as a kind of a middle finger to the establishment to a large extent. I mean, and along the course of that campaign, both sides kind of painted these very romantic ideas. On the one hand, you had the Remainers who very much framed EU membership as a statement of kind of liberalism and progressivism. And this kind of notion of a fraternity of European nations all kind of binding together as one. And then on the other side, there was this kind of there was an economic nationalist aspect. There was a sense of, I think, recovering lost imperial greatness, etc. And so when the kind of leaked paper trail that I was working with in this article. It starts in July 2018, and I think that this is a really interesting point because prior to this, for about almost since the referendum, there was a consensus that the result would be delivered upon. Every mainstream political party in the UK, apart from the Liberal Democrats, who went on to do not very perform rather poorly in the 2017 general election, stood on a platform of respecting the result of the referendum and delivering, withdrawal from the European Union. But then I think, by the time that July 2018 rolls around, actually, groups advocating for another referendum, or indeed just simply not honouring the referendum result, were starting to really gain in volume and significance, and they were conducting vast protests in London, and this kind of became somewhat turbocharged because in July 2018. The British government published what they called the Chequers white paper. That Chequers is the Prime Minister's kind of official stately home, and it set out this blueprint for London leaving the EU, which was based on the principle of managed divergence, quote unquote, which effectively it meant that Britain's relationship with the EU would be largely unchanged in many material ways, but it would not be able to access the same amount of supposed benefits, and would also it will also, yes, effectively be outside the bloc. And this was, I think that on the Remain side, people were like, right, well, this is the same that we had before, but worse. So why are we? Excuse me.
Sorry.
Yeah. So why are we? Why are we leaving in the first place? And then on the Leave side, it was like, well, this is membership via other means. It's membership in. It's leaving in name only, as it were. And so then this cabal, many of them are drawn from this group that was originally called Veterans for Brexit, and then went on to be known as Veterans for Britain, which is comprised of these members of kind of Britain's elite defence establishment. I mean, and many of them, the average person will not have heard of. But so in August 2018, the kind of the seeming head of the cabal, this individual called Wythian Prince, who's heavily tied to NATO and Britain's Chief of Defence Staff Strategy Advisory Panel. He circulates this extraordinary document that's titled Operation. Richard Dearlove, who is a fairly notorious former chief of MI6, which is Britain's foreign spying agency, who left the post in disgrace in 2004 after just 5 years, which is quite a short spell for the heads of these agencies, because it was found that he had told a great many lies about weapons of mass destruction in Iraq that proved kind of pivotal to the launching of that illegal war of aggression. So he's part of this too. And at one point, Dearlove and Wythian Prince sought to recruit their friend Henry Kissinger, charming old creature, to their efforts. But it doesn't seem like that was successful. But anyway, Prince called for effectively to information operations in order to block Theresa May's withdrawal agreement, to ensure that Britain had a kind of quote unquote hard Brexit, which meant that it would crash out without any kind of agreement in place on World Trade Organization terms, and then and if necessary to remove this prime minister and replace with one fit for purpose. So quite clearly talking about coups, etc. And so from this point on, they seem to have engaged in a large number of really like kind of undemocratic, if not outright criminal schemes in order to achieve their rather lofty goals. So for instance, the Dearlove investigated spying on and infiltrating Britain's civil service, and indeed kind of Downing Street, the centre of power, in order to disrupt and monitor discussions around leaving. And if they couldn't achieve that via Dearlove's MI6 contacts, they were going to potentially employ some of his former CIA colleagues to set up a fake Democratic Party organisation to approach Remainers from overseas and penetrate them. It was really quite extraordinary, and they had absolutely no compunction about going after journalists or MPs, ministers, civil servants, and campaign groups because they didn't like their politics, and they were willing to engage in some really nasty tactics in order to try and trip these people up. And so it's it's really quite extraordinary. This is tip of the iceberg in terms of what my first article exposes. There's a lot more to come. We're in possession of gigabytes of emails spanning years. But I guess that's about the sum of it. I'd also add that a kind of key component of this was that they had a mole, an infiltrator within the civil service itself, she was involved in negotiations around leaving. She had a direct line to top level discussions about departure. She was able to pass on documents, which is a very serious crime, and just kind of keep them up to date, kind of one step ahead of the government, as it were, because internal discussions would be reflected in kind of public, if at all, several days later, and they had the inside track, so were able to battle her vision, to Theresa May's vision of Brexit that way.
Yeah, that mole was Evelyn Farr, right? So This cabal included Githian Prince, like you mentioned. Then we had Richard Dearlove, who went by the codename C in the emails. Robert Toombs. So what exactly did they all want out of the Brexit deal? Why were they pro-leave? What do they gain out of that?
Well, I mean, I think that their agenda,
Yeah.
and I think that these people are insane, actually. But like, I mean, it's a slightly separate question. Is I think that their opposition to Theresa May's Brexit deal was primarily driven by the fact that they felt that it would keep, as part of keeping Britain effectively part of the EU. In particular, it would tether London to Brussels' defence structures and obligation. And thus undermine the Five Eyes global spying network, which Britain sits at the head of next to the US. And it's like, the EU is increasingly trying to integrate its defence amongst member states. It's talking of building an army. It's talking of building a intelligence service, for both internal and external. I mean, I think that these plans, if they would ever possibly work anyway, which I have, I'm in two minds about, I think that would take, that's kind of decades down the line before it becomes a reality. But then, that they were utterly convinced that it would undermine the UK's place in Five Eyes, and I think that it was interesting that I mentioned kind of. Some levers being driven by this wish to recover kind of lost imperial greatness. The Five Eyes Agreement, the foundation of that was what's called the UK-USA agreement. It was signed in 1947, which was at a time when Britain still had an empire to some extent. It had its Commonwealth. It was still a kind of global power, although that was in economic and military terms. But it was obviously it was rapidly dwindling. And the writing was on the wall in terms of where power really lay, which was, the US and to a lesser extent the Soviet Union. And so this is rather archaic, outdated agreement. It lends London a privileged position. So it leads this network, even though it has none of the infrastructure or reach of Washington. And it's as a result, it has kind of first-hand access to pretty much everything that's harvested. Five Eyes, it picks up text messages, phone calls, emails, even stuff that's picked up on baby monitors, like the world over, like with these grand spying centers like Pine Gap in Australia. And I mean, if we're going to be realistic, there's the UK is not on any remote footing with the US at all in any way, whether militarily, economically, or politically, in terms of international influence and reach and ability to project soft and hard power. It's nothing. And so I think that they were very, very worried about losing that position of kind of undue, unjustified privilege, and moreover as well. I think that they, on top of wanting to fend off any threat to that particular arrangement, I think that they also wanted to integrate the US ever further. Sorry, the UK ever further with the US on defence and intelligence matters. And I think much of their thinking is structured around that, seeking out ways to further synergize what's already a pretty close relationship in most kind of substantive regards. I mean, also as well. I mean, as I say, I think that these people are just lunatics, and they see, and we'll get into more of it later when we talk about our friend Priti Patel. They very much see people of any who have even vaguely different politics as Chinese agents. They think that there's that Black Lives Matter is this kind of secret overseas conspiracy. That they're completely obsessed with it. And as I say, they will go after people in a very, very vicious, nasty way if they see them as being a barrier to getting what they want, and willing to engage in spying, disruption, smear campaigns. All sorts. And so I think to a certain extent, their efforts around Brexit, they kind of saw it as a war. Like I think that they were excited and energized, and it's a bunch of old people who kind of in this dad's army way, trying to recover lost glory and the excitement of when they were younger. you know, so there was that kind of aspect to it. They saw everything as this kind of in kind of war terms, in terms of specific maneuvers, and that they would do it as if they're a tank regiment or something. It's very, very, very bizarre, and I find at times their writing to each other is really quite disturbing, and you think that a normal person would not speak like that, like whether publicly or privately, let alone think in those terms. But here we are.
Yeah. Yeah, and they were able to receive financial backing from some reclusive people like Tim and Mary Claude, who's a couple that lays low, and then they use Jersey as a a British tax haven.
Yeah.
And then there was Julian Toby Blackwell, who also was a financial backer of this cabal. Then they carried out the espionage operations with individuals who were reportedly quoted to be highly expert at this sort of espionage by Prinz. And this operation would be carried out similarly, but at a large scale than operations carried out by veterans for Britain. Now, in terms of this financial backing and the way that they carried out the operation, what parts of it would you say are considered to be illegal?
Well, I mean, I think that passing on sensitive documents, internal documents from the civil service, which are for civil service eyes only. I mean, that's a breach of the Official Secrets Act, which is I disagree with how harsh it is, because it of course obviously deters legitimate whistleblowers and leakers. But equally, that is a very serious offence. I mean, I think that in proposing to spy on the civil service and infiltrate them and then dig up dirt on them that you can release to the press. I mean, there's like fairly basic dirty tricks, but the civil service is regarded as a fairly essential permanent faceless bureaucracy, which is integral to the machinery of government. I mean, that is, and attempting to do that, but also specifically to undermine them is rather unconscionable. And it's like they're still at this. So that there was this case like last summer in the UK where effectively someone who was working for the Ministry of Defence accidentally left this huge tranche of sensitive papers at a bus stop somehow in southeast England. Now, this was very embarrassing, and the British establishment moved to protect this guy, to the extent that there was an order was put out that the media not mention his name. And the cabal found out about this. Found out who it was, and because he was a perceived quote unquote Romaniac, they decided to just destroy his life. And so they were attempting to get word out to journalists, leak his name, in the hope that he would be prosecuted, approaching US officials saying what would happen to someone to someone who did the same in the US, so we can say to elected officials and ministers, oh well, why is he getting away with this and stuff. I mean, and as I say, a lot of it kind of takes on it was just literally they just wanted to ruin his life, have him prosecuted, maybe put in prison, just purely because he preferred staying in the EU to leaving it. I mean, and again, it's like they very considering all of the rather dubious, if not criminal activity they get up to, they also seem to be almost like kind of ambulance chasing in terms of being on the lookout for ways that they can, get criminal or indeed civil charges leveled against people. So, I mean, again, in the over the course of the Tory leadership, Conservative leadership election, summer 2019, which is when Boris got elected, Boris Johnson, they were in constant contact with Boris Johnson's team. They were giving them information. Dearlove was briefing Johnson on the threat posed by Huawei, the kind of the Chinese tech giant, and was seemed very convinced that he was influencing Johnson's thinking on that. And lo and behold, now Johnson's in government. He's completely overturned. Also, he's kind of completely cut the UK out of Huawei's network and that sort of thing, and basically penalised the company But during this campaign, the Guardian reported on the basis of a recording made by Johnson's then girlfriend, who was called Carrie Simmons. They had a domestic, a fairly loud domestic at her London apartment, and their neighbours recorded it and provided it to the Guardian newspaper. Now, I mean, irrespective of what you think the ethics are of doing that, to a private citizen, irrespective of who they are, their response was to try and have the Guardian and indeed the people who provided the recording to the newspaper prosecuted under privacy laws, and they were boasting about how they were going to how they would make these people suffer and all this other thing. And it's like, I mean, even though this actually didn't even come to anything, I just think it says a lot about their kind of the lengths that they're willing to go to. I mean, but also you see this in their attempts to win favor with people who to win favor with people. So I mean, and I kid you not, I mean, it's just so utterly disturbing. Like Gwydion Prince, when they were trying to get a direct line to Boris Johnson, suggested effectively pimping out his own daughter. And I'm not joking, and making the point that he met her during the referendum campaign. He never forgets a pretty face, that could be a way in. It's just like, who thinks that? Like it's psychotic.
Lunatics.
But then the response, there's also, and then in response, Dearlove was saying, it's best to get, it is best to get someone near him because we could try and contact him on Signal, but GCHQ is probably monitoring all of his communications. I know for a fact we monitor all these friendly leaders' communications, and again, it just seems to be this amoral world. I mean, it's immoral, but it's like the people operating in it just completely amoral. Like they don't adhere to the same ethical framework that the average person does. And I think that yes, that this tranche is a stunningly stark insight into the minds of and in the minds of the powerful, and indeed how power in Britain truly works. All of these shadowy, unknown actors who aren't elected and aren't accountable to voters, and they have so much clout over elected lawmakers and leaders. They influence their policies, they influence their actions, they influence their public statements, and they're completely unseen. And they're usually doing it for malign, specific, selfish purposes.
Yeah. So, what was Priti Patel's role with this cabal?
Okay, well, I mean, I think that to suggest that she's part of the cabal is probably a bit too on the nose.
Okay.
But I think that I mean, she's certainly involved with them.
Yeah.
And it's like there are many different strands to this, but one of the things that that jumps out is that the key thing here is that the Prince and Dearlove were trying to put together what they called Dark Ullen. That's Dark ULLEN. It was the code word title of their quote unquote China project, and it was an effort to be conducted on the same broad principles and methods as an MI6 research and influence operation. And it's not precisely clear what they were planning to do, but I mean, at least part of it was targeting environmental activists and green lobbyists or advocates in the kind of bizarre belief that they were actually secret communist agents working for the Chinese, along with Black Lives Matter. And they approached people close to Priti Patel and managed to arrange a meeting between Gwydion and Patel. And in leading up to this, there's a very revealing email from Prince where he says he says he's putting together some material for their meeting so Patel can see, quote unquote, how a proper counterintelligence operation ought to be run. He also refers to how Patel is paying close attention and starting to act on energy, on their behalf, it seems. And the meeting itself he kind of writes up a report on it subsequently, and he talks for internal circulation. Prince does, and he includes this absolutely crazy chart, which looks like when you give spiders drugs and they like make like those crazy webs. Like it's all of the all this diagram with lots of boxes and lines like swirling everywhere. You should see it to understand it, and it lists all of these environmental and green advocates, outlines that outlining their kind of proximity to one another, and and indeed how close they are to Downing Street, the Prime Minister's office, as it were. And Prince adds in the email that he wants Patel, that this is for the purposes of Dar Cullen, and which will engage in the sort of work MI5 run properly would be doing, which basically means targeting perceived enemy agents on British soil, spying on them, discrediting them, and disrupting them. And yes, he adds that he would like a specific proton mail to be set up for Patel, so they can keep in quiet contact, and also urges her to get in touch with him via signal. Now, it's not clear if this did happen, but if it did, then that's a breach of the ministerial code, and that's very, very, very serious. I mean, Patel has done this before. She took a great many trips to Israel on courtesy of this very prominent Israeli Zionist lobbyist. She repeatedly lied about them. She didn't declare them, and I mean, it's quite amazing that she's back. But I think there are some people who, for certain reasons which are clear and which are either clear or unclear, seem rather bulletproof in politics. I mean, Boris Johnson is another one of them, of course, who just never seems to tell a lie too big or commit a crime too serious that people don't just kind of look the other way.
So, given the history that Priti Patel has, and the influence that she has with this cabal and their history, some of the connections that they have with people like Mike Pompeo and other people from the U.S. intelligence, as well as intelligence from MI6, why would it be safe to assume that they strongly favor Julian Assange's extradition to the U.S.?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the Patel in general is I mean, she's very much an establishment figure, and I mean, often these people have come up through what are effectively, American networks. There's a wide array of organizations which kind of exist to promote the transatlantic alliance, and they often will identify people at university, kind of elite British universities, take them on free trips to America and teach them about the American way. And so when they if and when they do get into politics or big business, they are reliable allies. I mean, I think as well with there's another thing to consider, which is there's an email from Dearlove to Prince, which is very revealing. He talks about how it's so great that they're getting purchased, quote unquote, with Patel on certain issues, because she is preoccupied currently with a leadership bid, i.e., becoming prime minister. This has never ever been acknowledged or even speculated in the British media. I mean, this is an email from February, so quite where this effort has gotten behind the scenes so far, we don't know. But it's you mentioned Mike Pompeo. He specifically said when he visited the UK that Jeremy Corbyn would never be allowed to be prime minister. In not so many words. He just said that the US might consider him a terror threat. And I think in another email, Dearlove literally said Corbyn cannot be prime minister, and I don't think that was kind of his wishful, or his wish or desire. I think that was literally just how it seemed, that he can't, he's physically incapable of it, because he's not one of us. And I think that'd be very much the view from America, that unless Patel is a dependable and unquestioning ally, then she cannot become leader. And we see this happening now with Macron and Scholz, the German leader, they're being routinely thrown under the bus and there's a large there's she's by numerous kind of think tank apparatchiks and other kind of defense foreign policy hawks, because they are refusing to effectively launch World War III, and by massively extending European involvement, direct involvement in Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and they're attempting to try and facilitate, although obviously not particularly effectively, a diplomatic solution. And it very much seems that there's a kind of a realignment now where security arrangements are increasingly being, the European security engagements are increasingly being seen as being led by, Britain and America. So again, it seems like the cabal has kind of gotten their way over the course of this conflict. I mean, it would be entirely unsurprising if Patel does sign off on poor Julian's extradition. I mean, I think that, as I mentioned in my piece, this is documented by the journalist Matt Kennard, that she was sitting on the advisory council of that awful neoconservative think tank, the Henry Jackson Society, alongside the husband of Lady Emma Arbuthnot, who made two key rulings against Assange in 2018, and then was forced to step aside due to perception of bias. Has counted a CIA director as a patron for many years. It's hosted 3 former CIA chiefs at its headquarters on events since 2014. I mean, again, the establishment is a very particular type of club, and you ain't in it. It's very, very incestuous, insidious, all of these kind of intimate, unspoken, secret connections. I mean, even if she does move to extradite, Julian could appeal, although there is always the prospect that could be overturned, that could be denied or overturned. I mean, it's just shocking to me that I remember very well. I went down to the embassy after the day that he'd been snatched by the police, and it's just like that was more than 3 years ago now, and it's just he's just still stuck in limbo. And horrific, torturous conditions. I mean, I think about him every day, pretty much.
Yeah, I really appreciate the strong activism people there in the UK are doing to help free Julian Assange, to help spread the word about how this is really an injustice. He just did the work that any journalist would do in revealing war crimes that the U.S. and not just the U.S. but other countries do, but specifically in this, what they're trying to extradite him for is for revealing war crimes the United States committed. But yeah, I mean, clearly you wrote here that these connections that Priti Patel and this cabal have with people like you said, Lady Emma Arbuthnot and
Arbuthnot. It's British words are often designed to trip up people from other nations, I think, but there's no shame in it. But yeah, it's just crazy to me. And then you have all of these people who are either related or married to people involved in Julian's case who have interest in private intelligence organizations and everything. It's just and I think this is something that's really interesting, is that there's just the kind of incestuousness of it. Everyone seems to be like kind of like one step removed from a kind of a senior former or current intelligence officer, and these are the people who are deciding on what happens to a publisher who, yes, is now on record was subject to a plot from the CIA to kidnap or kill him in the streets of London. And I mean, and again, underlining British subservience to America. There's in that Yahoo article which exposed that kind of dastardly, vile, plot to basically murder an innocent publisher for telling the truth. There's a great excerpt in it where they say that the Americans asked the British to do the shooting and the British agreed. And it's just like it's just extraordinary. Oh yeah, can you just kill this person for us, please? Oh yeah, right. Sure.
Just casually, right? Just because he revealed some stuff that's an inconvenience for them. What was with the talking points that you wrote about, the paranoid cabal talking points that Patel was parroting about Ukrainian refugees Was she claiming that there were Russian infiltrators among the Ukrainian refugees and they didn't want to allow them to come to the UK?
Yeah, and I think that this is a very flagrant example of the kind of hold on her. So it's like in kind of at the start of March, Britain was getting a lot of flack for not taking so many Ukrainian refugees. I mean, this is, I think it's about 10 million people have fled the country now. Priti Patel was getting a lot of flack, and she in more generally, she's caught an awful lot of flack. She kind of hatched this utterly bizarre plan to effectively, ship off asylum seekers and refugees and immigrants to Rwanda. At enormous hassle and expense for no good reason other than Britain doesn't want people who aren't white, and so essentially she was getting an awful lot of flack for this, and there's a huge public kind of upsurge in grief at all of these people fleeing a terrible war zone, and so Prince wrote this extensive kind of briefing document, which it was called a set of key messages for the Home Office, which was would allow her to kind of regain control over the narrative around this. And so essentially, one of these key messages was the fact that we can't let Ukrainian refugees in because they might be kind of GRU murderers sent to kill British citizens or carry out sabotage, black ops spying operations. And just days later, Patel made the exact same charge in her party conference address. In Prince's briefing document, he refers to the Salisbury incident, and in which it seems that this former GRU double agent Sergei Skripal and his daughter Yulia were attacked with a nerve agent, emphasis on seams, and she made frequent reference to Salisbury as well, and it seems to have been effective. There's all of the public demands for the UK to take more refugees have kind of gotten quietened down a bit. But yeah, I mean, and it's so. I mean, we can't specifically prove that they were the ones who put this thought in her head, but it very much seems that way. And yeah, it very much seems that they're in direct contact with her. Their mole in the civil service is redrafting and going over Home Office legislation, rewriting it. So it seems to be cozy. I'm giving myself a get out here if they come after me legally, which is I'm not saying that she is an agent of influence being consciously directed and led along and taking orders from an intelligence cabal, but I mean it seems they do have a hold over her, and they are they do have influence.
Yeah, and was she also repeating the same talking points about the Chinese company, the tech company Huawei, about how this is like a tech company that is spying for the Chinese Communist Party so that the company can be removed from Britain's 5G network? Why didn't they want Huawei's participation in this network?
Well, I think that I do think that it seems like from the emails they have they do have a kind of a sense that this is this dangerous Chinese weapon of war. But then they think the same about COVID and all of this, and just anything they don't like is a Chinese plot. And so essentially, I think that there's that element to it. But also, I also think that, as is the case with many kind of criticisms of China and Russia, it's actually kind of inspired by the kind of the difficulties posed to intelligence agencies. So Huawei's networks are very resilient. The spies have found them very difficult to break into, and Huawei also, unlike Western companies, refused to place backdoors in all of their equipment. Much like Microsoft and all these other tech giants, they were asked by the NSA, "Oh, can you include all of these weaknesses in your systems that we know that we can very easily break through?" And all of the tech companies said yes, of course. And essentially, Huawei didn't do that, and of course that makes it easier. That makes it harder for spy agencies to disrupt, manipulate, exploit, weaponize. There was I think it was at the end of last year, there was a kind of Bloomberg article which was talking about how difficult it is for the CIA to spy in China and gather agents in China, because of surveillance methods mean that it's harder to meet with agents privately, and also anti-corruption measures mean that it's very difficult to bribe people, and public officials' finances are scrutinized very thoroughly. Now, you can find endless articles talking about, how awful Chinese surveillance is, and also even articles that say, one of those classic, China at what cost kind of pieces that was talking about.
Oh, there's so many of those. Yeah.
How they
China is advancing at what cost?
They've eradicated corruption, but at what cost? It's just like, well, actually, the root of these concerns, quote unquote, is that it makes it harder for them to spy. So it would be entirely unsurprising if that's why Huawei is is subject to such opprobrium and all of these charges. I mean, I think that again, another theme of this is that that in January 2017 there was this intelligence community assessment that was issued that was about the alleged meddling in the Russian meddling in the 2016 presidential election. Most of it was going on about Russia Today. And it's like, and you're talking about what an evil threat to humanity it was. And I think that it's because, RT's, dead now, or as good as, but, it was because the intelligence services didn't control their output, or didn't have a significant degree of control in their output, unlike, the entire mainstream media. We see this from the leaked emails. Like, these people are directly coordinating with journalists and media outlets, and planting stories, false or otherwise, using the media to go after their enemies, and they're taking direct instruction. I mean, it's really quite amazing, and it seems like business as usual to them. They don't even try and bother speaking in coded, euphemistic language. They just pretty much openly state, like, okay, right, well, you need to go after this person and claim they're a Chinese spy, or they've been compromised, or go after this person, or we think that you should write this story, and then it happens.
So after this cabal went through all the trouble to replace Theresa May with Boris Johnson, they now want to remove him. So why is it that they want to remove Boris Johnson now?
What's it called? I mean, it's an awful. I mean, I think basically it was expected that Boris would come in and he would, be this pretty much far right leader. There would be a bonfire of regulation. There would be the wages would be slashed for poorer workers. Welfare protections, employment protections would be completely incinerated, and taxes would be reduced to nothing, and that it would be, in the words of one several prominent Brexiteers, it would be a Singapore on Thames, that kind of model. I mean, that hasn't happened. It hasn't happened on a startling scale, and actually, this government has spent an enormous amount of money, usually on just stuff like furlough. But it's a very different government to what they were expecting, and also as well, I think that they're not quite as out of the EU as they want to be. Ultimately, that's a process which, if there is even political will for it, will take years, because Britain was heavily integrated with the EU, and it's for 40 years. and economically, politically, and so I mean, all of these structures might have gone, but I think that their legacy remains in some ways, and they're not happy about that. So I think they see in Patel someone who is kind of on their wavelength, someone who's probably lacking in the same kind of concerns as Johnson about being liked by the public, and has I mean she is spoken out in favour of the death penalty in the past. She suggested one way of resolving issues around the Irish border would be to just starve the Irish into submission and kind of force Dublin into just go along with what they wanted. I mean, she seems to that. Doesn't seem to be rhetoric. I think she seems to actually believe that this is feasible and practicable and unproblematic. I mean, I've always found her very, very frightening. I'm entirely unsurprised these people like her and that she's influenced by what they're saying. And I mean, I'm not sure what impact this article's had. It seems to have travelled very widely. Although I mean, either way, if we see Priti Patel in public talking about the evils of China and Chinese agents and going after green lobbyists, I think, well, we have our answer why that's happening.
I mean, we see that she was okay with working with people that were okay with just killing off Julian Assange. So I'm sure if she is in agreement with a lot of things that they are with, and she might be okay with just having him die off, if she's okay with the death penalty. So you guys try to reach out to all these players, all these people in the cabal. The only one that responded was Evelyn Farr, right? And she said, "I don't know what you're talking about." She played the role of the mole, feeding information and documents to this cabal. She said, "I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know who you are or why you've got this number, and I haven't gotten a clue what you're talking about." So I wanted to get your thoughts on what she said, why you think she reacted like this, and if you try to reach out to anyone else. Have you guys tried to reach out to Priti Patel to get her perspective on anything?
I mean, of course we've reached out. We've reached out to the Home Office. I mean, we've reached out to FAR's employers within the civil service and provided them with this material. I think they have a right to know. The response has been silent. Although, I mean, in terms of public and response, it's been extraordinary, and I think that the pressure is building for the mainstream to kind of to acknowledge what's happening. Lots of people are approaching prominent kind of liberal journalists or kind of pro-Remain journalists in the UK and saying like, why haven't you done anything on this? Have you seen this? Blah blah. And so I mean, it seems to be building. We're in touch with a large number of organisations and individuals who were targeted. I think they were trying to. There's this guy called Julian Morgan in the UK who is he's a very formidable solicitor who. He fought several very successful legal challenges related to Brexit, and continues to sue the government over issues like corruption and withholding information and stuff. And they were proposing, because they feared that he would try and stop Brexit outright, that the Prince and Dearlove were discussing getting MI5 intelligence on people like him. To quote unquote put the frighteners on them, i.e., to intimidate them, make them back off. They've messed with the wrong person there. He has publicised our work, which we're very grateful for. Our discussions continue. With a great many people. I think that they've sought to irritate. The wrong people in many regards, and indeed in some cases people who they've been going after for years, and who I think are primed to respond in kind to the abuse that they've been receiving. And as I say, there's a lot more to come. We have a lot more to say, and I think that particularly now that we're having all of these prosecutions about resulting from the Durham probe, yeah, Dearlove met with Attorney General Durham and spoke about his role in Russiagate and stuff. So I mean, that's something we're going to be reporting on very soon.
So you think that Evelyn Farr's response is someone who's guilty? The way she was
Oh
kind of
yeah, yeah.
startled.
I mean, I think that like she just. I mean, I think that I mean, and we can give you an example of how we we verify this stuff. I mean, like I think this was just pure like feigning ignorance. She was lying,
Uh-huh.
blah blah. I mean, the metadata on the emails is like a fingerprint. But like when you're getting into a situation where she's like sending to, she's sending. Documents internally to to cabal members in emails containing her private mobile number, which we verified, and attaching documents which show that she wrote them in emails saying please remove the metadata because it's incriminating. They thought that they were a lot smarter than they were, and they also thought that they could say anything they wanted. I mean, I reached out to her via WhatsApp. She immediately blocked me. When I messaged, so we had to resort to ringing her. She just, I think that she's a rabbit caught in the headlights, really. And I think that, I mean, she's quite clearly a nasty person, but they thought that they would never ever get caught and that they could just say whatever they wanted and be entirely open about it. I think they found out the hard way they can't. So just remember, you can't always trust encryption.
Yeah. So yeah, Kit, thanks again for coming on the show. You're doing amazing work. You have a lot of patience going through all of these emails. You've revealed a lot of important information. I remember reporting on the leaked emails that revealed the connection with British intelligence and BreadTube. I mean, this is an influential group of people to try to manufacture a lot of well-meaning leftists consent for imperialism, for what the intelligence community, the Pentagon, the U.S. Pentagon, what all these people want to do. I mean, it's really important to expose all these players, and I think you're doing a great job doing that.
Okay, awesome. All right, thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thanks again, Kit, for coming on the show. And everybody else, stay informed.